Well, expectations are high for tomorrow's State of the Nation address, where President Cyril Ramaphosa will shed light on how the socio-economic challenges will be tackled. All right, let's get a sense of what could be done and how to do this. We're now joined via Zoom by Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko. She's the development economist at the University of Syellenbosch. Dr. Moleko, very good afternoon to you. Thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me, and a very good afternoon to you.
You're most welcome. This will be a very different State of the Nation address. Not the usual Parliament fanfare, not the usual red carpet and the dress up, although I see you're dressed up, so possibly those who will be joining via social media, those ministers will perhaps be dressed up. So, and possibly maybe, in fact, this is a good thing. You know, it's not really the right tone for that, for those red carpet situations that we've always kind of seen. What are the general expectations from where you sit in terms of what we can expect from the State of the Nation address, not just the President's address, which we'll obviously get to, but really everything around it being a different kind of State of the Nation address this time around?
I think that this current situation requires a real vision, to come from the president in his State of Nation address. I think we need to have a vision that revitalizes not just the country's economy, but I think the social and development trajectory requires us to look at and hear from the president what must be done from an institutional perspective, from a planning perspective. And I think that the targets that are set, it is clear that we need not only improve the economic constraints flow, but I think that it must be agreed that we want a society where all South Africans are working, where poverty, inequality, and unemployment is not a normal. And I think for that, we need a real vision that will take us through the next year, hope that will take us through the next trajectory. And it's not sufficient to do what we have always done in the current circumstances. We surely need to hear from the president something that is very different from just setting of targets, but an assessment of what has worked, what hasn't worked in the previous years, and how this will inform the cycle of 2021 going forward. And I think that is very critical for us, because we want to hear not just a list of things as we have heard before, but rather what new things will be done, what mitigating actions given the current economic crises and the pandemic that we have right now in the country.
Dr. Moleko, I want to talk to specifics. You would know that every single sector has lamented lockdown. Businesses have closed down. People have lost jobs. It's really been quite the crisis. And I suppose this is quite an unfair question to pose to you, but I'm going to pose it anyway. Which sector, if you look at it, is the one that needs the most attention, that will sort of help the rest, kickstart the rest into getting into some sort of normalcy? Obviously, we can't get to the point of being normal again, but which sector, if you look at it, is the one that we must really be focused on most by the president?
So I think what I would look at, the basis of which sector, I think, given the unfair question I'm being asked, but I'll still answer, is that which sector has the capability of improving South Africa's export capability, and a sector that has labor absorptive capacity. So doubly, these will help us not only generate revenue, but deal with the structural problem of unemployment in South Africa. So South Africa's economic history has pathways of import dependency, heavy reliance on mineral exports and commodities being exported raw. So I think for me, the economic restructuring I'd want to hear the president talk to is what manufacturing industrial complex will be targeted at which of the frontier products. And I think the frontier products talk to a sectoral composition of our manufacturing value add to GDP increasing. So there's a plethora of subsectors within that, but specifically manufacturing. That's number one. Number two, we've got an opportunity flow with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which we can maneuver and make use of to increase our export capability and also intra-Africa trade. But you must remember, we are within the regional bloc of SACU. So within that, Once I think Botswana is the one that's outstanding, ratifies, we then can also drive expansion of South Africa's frontier products and manufactured goods into Africa. And I think there are certain enablers to that. If we're going to drive that, we need to produce and have trade finance for these differentiated products in manufacturing. And again, these require our national empowerment funds, our CFAs, and your development finance institutions to be financed and enabled better to enhance this capability of driving export expansion, but also driving new frontier products into Africa.
Yeah, the State of the Nation address is known generally to talk about, plans moving forward, reflecting on what has been done. We had the State of the Nation address last year, and then we suddenly had to deal with pandemic. And I wonder if much of the speech tomorrow by the President will focus a lot on the pandemic. And I wonder if it will be perhaps even an excuse to say, well, look, we couldn't really do all the things that we promised to do last year because, as you know, we got hit by this pandemic. Do you sort of foresee that being a sort of crutch for the government to hold on to say, yes, okay, we did promise that, but we couldn't do it because, remember, we had the pandemic? Or do you get a sense that, yes, much has been done, much has, given what we were faced with, much has been done and much has still been able to carry on?
I think it would be a missed opportunity. Why I say this is that South Africa has a gender-based violence crisis. South Africa has had a multiplicity of recessions prior to COVID-19 coming to South Africa, in the sense that the lockdown, which was upon us end of March last year, South Africa already had an economic crisis. So the pandemic came, we already had GBV pandemic or crises. We already had announcements from the president in this regard, also the economic crises and the recessions that propelled the further weakening of the economy. So I think it would be a missed opportunity for the president to only focus on the pandemic, as though South Africa is outside of the context of the social constraint and the economic constraints. I do believe, though, that it is necessary for the government to look at the alternative methods of prevention and controlling COVID, because COVID has accentuated, in some instances, GBV. COVID has also weakened the economic interventions. But I think more importantly, what we want to hear is what package of policies are necessary to resume full operations of most of our subsectors. But not only that, what prevention mechanisms and policy mix is necessary for the recovery of South Africans and the protection of human life in South Africa. I think we've had enough time to look at what we've tried to do in response to COVID. Has it successfully impacted controlling the reduction of the spread, but also preventing and also controlling further lives being lost? And I think the president has an opportunity here to show what can be done as an alternative to what hasn't worked. So I think that we have an opportunity, and I think it's not sufficient for us to only focus on COVID. People need to eat. People are going hungry. Poverty is causing death. Poverty is leading to inequality and further worsening the economic plight of most of our people, even those who are foreign entrants or migrants into South Africa. And I think this is also very important for us to focus on and hear from the president himself how we're going to resume from a policy perspective to try and deal with all the other crises that South Africa is dealing with. So it wouldn't be enough to look at only the pandemic and also to only use the pandemic. The pandemic has simply accentuated the existing cracks and fractures in South Africa's economy and social fabric.
All right, Dr. Moleko, a great pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so very much for giving us your time here on SABC News.